Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hi, Janine. I'm chair of the Conservation Commission.
Hey, how are you, Laura? Sorry,
Good.
I'm used to Teams, so now I'm trying to figure out Zoom.
I'm still trying to figure it out too.
Yeah,
Okay, we'll just wait one more minute to give people a chance to get on.
hi Terry.
Hey Janine, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Did you finish those 4,000 footers?
Not yet. I did nothing this year. I'm so ashamed of myself. Still time. Maybe I'll get a couple in.
Yeah, you can do the winter peaks.
There you go.
Kim's not coming this morning. Haven't heard from Reed Carr though yet.
Okay, they should be here in a minute. And is Eric coming?
Haven't heard from him.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get started. I'll call this meeting to order. And do we have any public comment this morning?
Nothing for me, thanks.
Thanks, Reed. All right. The only thing, is there any business that anyone wanted to bring up for this meeting? Okay, the only thing that I had was I got an email yesterday from Meg Handler, who lives on Lake Iroquois, and she is starting a petition to limit wakeboarding on certain lakes. I think Lake Iroquois is one of them, and she wanted the Conservation Commission to look at that. Is that something we can do at our next meeting, Melinda?
Sure.
Okay. All right. I think she wanted us to write a letter of support to limit wakeboarding, but we can look at that, and I don't have all the details yet. I'll forward you the letter.
Okay, thanks.
Okie dokie. Let's go on to the minutes of October 6th.
Okay. Actually, have I got the right one? No, I haven't. Sorry about that.
I was thinking those looked a little bit old.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, I
Let's see if
thought I
I
read
can.
those minutes. It's not what
I was going
remembered.
along thinking, oh, okay. Well, it looks familiar.
Oh, no, that's right. Hold on. We'll get there.
No worries.
Where are the minutes? Nope. Okay, so October 6th and okay, there we go. Like it.
So I had one comment a little bit slightly farther down in here, Melinda, in the Conservation Commission recommendation piece. And at the part that says encroachments must be minimized to the extent possible. Do we mean to say to the greatest extent possible, or is that good enough the way it's written?
I'm trying to think. What yeah, probably. And I'll just make sure that says that in the recommendations.
That's all I had.
Any other comments about the minutes? Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes with that slight change?
I'll move to approve the minutes as amended.
Thanks, Reed.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor of accepting the minutes as amended signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Does anyone abstain? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Okay, let's move on to our next order of business.
Okay, hold on. Let me put the right agenda up.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Janine, are you here to speak to this or?
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly, just kind of do a real brief intro. And yeah, I basically want to just kind of introduce the project and then answer any questions, or at least, maybe listen to any questions that you might have, try to answer them. But if I can't, I'm taking notes, and I just want to make sure that, we know what your concerns, if any, are, or any comments that you might have or suggestions as we work on this project. So do you want me to just go ahead and get started, or?
Just to preface that, this is a project that CSWD will be submitting an application for discretionary permit. Is that right, Janine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I kind of mentioned to Melinda, I mean, I understand kind of Williston's process, but, I really wanted to kind of get in front of you guys before that whole process started, because, by then we've already put in, a fair amount of work. And so, I'd rather get on the front end of it and, listen to what your guys' thoughts are on the project, and, try to work that in before we actually get into the formal permitting process. So, but I understand, I guess we'll probably have to come back through you once we submit that application. Does that sound correct, or? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify, just so
Sure.
that they understand that we haven't yet received a formal application for this project.
I understand it's a really good idea to talk about it first, so that, yeah, before you put a lot of work into something that needs to be changed, that we've already seen it.
Yeah. Great.
So I have a
Janine,
question. Did you want to do more, Janine, before we have questions?
Well, it's up to you. Do you want, I mean, I'm sure you read the memo. It's
Yeah.
a work in progress, but, I'll just summarize it real quickly. Based on the memo, we are looking at putting a new approach in from the south end. I'm sure most of you have been out there right now. The actual lot that the original facility is on is kind of has a horseshoe kind of entrance exit. You can enter and exit from both of our access points. And so the southernmost one, we call it our gate one. I'm going to refer to it that. We're trying to get consistent with that, just so we all know internally which one we're talking about. I'll call it the gate one access. Right now it enters off of Redmond Road. And thanks, Melinda. If you look at, so this is currently where, can you guys see my pointer?
No.
Do I have to do what?
Do you want to share your screen, Janine, or do you want me to just tell you where you want me to put my cursor?
Okay, so if you can go down to the current access, which is just to the left of the existing Line Lagoon. No, there you go. That's the current access right there. And you go up and you can see where the existing scale is. It's kind of in the middle of the property, if you will. And that's currently where, larger vehicles drive across for our feedstocks and then turn around and they actually come back out that same entrance. It's a little safer for them than if you were to kind of just drive all the way through. You can see, there you go. That's gate 2. So we're kind of on that curb right there. It's a little tricky. And so we're, the purpose behind the new approach is really twofold. It's safety in terms of bringing vehicles off Redmond Road. And then also, we are kind of at the end of life of our current scale. It's been there since the facility went in. As with everything, right? There's new software, there's new whatever. And so it's really becoming harder for us to kind of keep that scale and have to upgrade it. And plus we're, it's rusting out, quite frankly. We really need to go ahead and replace that. So we started thinking about, what a layout and approach would be for us to get into the facility. There is a building, what I'm calling the new scale house and maintenance garage. That actually currently is a ranch house that's right up against the road. It's 860 Redmond Road. And we would like to repurpose that into our scale house. And we're actually going to remove, there's an existing garage, pretty big garage that was associated with that house that we store equipment in right now. And we are actually going to be taking off about 30% of the front of that building and continuing to use it kind of as a garage for the facility. So the new approach, would get us some more kind of queuing area that's not on Redmond Road. Not a huge problem right now. Every day, leaf season can be challenging at times, and just getting folks in and out of there. And, I'll be honest, in terms of like where our existing facility is and where the pieces and parts are, obviously some of those things can't move because it's infrastructure. We have, an active composting. We have active composting infrastructure in both the building with the roof and immediately in front of it. So there are certain things on the property that we really can't move. And we're trying to figure out, once you're up on the site, what's the best circulation pattern on the site. That'll kind of be that's what we're looking at right now, trying to get a site planner to kind of help us with that. So that's kind of the lined lagoon also, I guess, just to kind of talk about that a little bit. That is indeed it's a lined pond. My understanding is originally it was constructed. Our thought is to use that. We collect rainwater in there and we use that in our process. I think I might have talked to you about this previously, but the reality is that there's water in it when we don't need water because it's raining. And then when it's really dry out, it doesn't hold water. So essentially we're pumping water into it to then use in our process. So I think the idea behind it was to collect rainwater wherever we could and use it. We still are interested in doing that. We also have a 20,000 gallon underground storage tank that collects leachate off of the pad there. We do reuse that water on a regular basis. So, you know, we're trying to do that as much as we can, but the lagoon, you know, it's a storage area for water, but it's kind of just too active for us in terms of like trying to keep water in it. And so we're going to propose to remove that. We could use the land area more than the actual pond itself, or lagoon, whatever you want to call it. So we're gonna go ahead and take that out and create, you know, land there, just fill it. So that's, I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but those are the main components. So obviously why we came to you is because, you know, you can see that we're crossing that small stream. And there is a wetland associated with that. Back in, I guess it was the fall of 2020, I had a gentleman from Lemro and Dickinson, Brian Trumbeck, came out and actually delineate wetlands right along that stream. And then this past May, when we started looking at the alignments, we had Fitzgerald Environmental who came out and did some more wetland delineation on the property. So with the new approach, we're actually nicking a small corner of that area, kind of where the wetland mitigation area is, and then also impacting some wetland that runs right around the stream. And so we're proposing kind of, you know, I think it's going to turn out to be almost a 10-to-1 ratio of mitigation to what our impact is. I don't know, it's early if I did that math right, but so Carl, did that answer any questions, or did you have additional?
Well, I didn't ask the question, but since I have the floor, let me.
Oh, sorry.
I can't quite follow the location of this. And I guess one thing would help is, what is that road going off to the left?
I think that's called Chip Alley. It goes over into IBM.
The end of
Okay.
it's blocked off with Jersey barriers, I believe. It's an unused
Yeah, I think,
entrance.
yep. Yeah, there's another one farther south on Redmond Road. Maybe that's Chip Alley. I don't know if this one has a name or not, but yes, it is blocked off.
Okay, I guess I'm not even picturing where along Redmond Road this whole project is. Is it possible that you might have a zoom out map so we can see a little better where on Redmond Road this is all located? Because it's not what I thought it was.
Let's see what I can do.
I mean, let me see if I can open up Google Earth and show that. Let's see.
Carl, do you know the one farmhouse? I think it's a farmhouse on the left-hand side after you go past the IBM entrance.
Yeah.
And then this is kind of immediately following that. So you go past that farmhouse and it kind of dips down to the left a little bit. And that's where this new proposed turnoff on the right is, the black dotted line. And then there's that unused IBM entrance on the left, if that gives you any more context.
Hold on, let me do this.
Yeah.
Here, let me.
Sometimes they hold a ham radio event in that field there. I don't know if that helps.
No.
They have a porta potty there, and a couple of weekends a year they set up.
Let's see. Where are we?
Melinda, it's if you want to put in 1042 or just 1042 Redmond Road, it might take you right to it.
Well, right here.
Oh, wait, there you go. There you
Can
go.
you all see it?
Yeah.
So just to zoom out to give you some,
Right. So
That's
there's the
basically-
Velco. That's also the big Velco laydown area, I guess, right there. Yep.
Okay,
Does that
So
help,
where-
Carl?
Where is Mountain View Road?
Mountain View Road is down here.
Yeah.
okay. Just- So the area that we're talking about is this area called Green Mountain Compost?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
It's on the way to the dump.
yeah, right.
which is
But
up
it's
there.
before the drop-off center,
It's before the drop-off center. Yeah.
and it's before where you, before the area where you drop off your lawn stuff and where you used to drop off your food waste.
Well, actually, that's this area. That's the facility that we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the first entrance that's usually not the entrance by the office where the food scrap bins were, but the other entrance, Carl, that's
Yeah.
that you pass on the way down to it.
Okay.
So would the trucks, Janine, still be exiting out the other end, or the vehicles?
Well, some vehicles may exit out there. You know, that's part of the larger trucks that are required to use a scale. So we get what we call feedstocks, right? They're really ingredients for compost. And so the haulers that bring in food scraps have to weigh in and weigh out. So they would actually be coming in and going out the same way. Right now, that's our thought. We're trying to kind of figure out, does it make sense to somewhat separate? I'll use the term commercial when I'm talking about like the trash haulers or the food scrap haulers, or we get manure loads. We are looking at trying to kind of separate the more residential, like Carl was saying, the everyday homeowner who's bringing their leaf and food waste, versus kind of the more commercial traffic once they get up on site. But certainly the residential could go out either way. We haven't really nailed that down. As you can see, that gate 2, which Reed was saying is, the way that people are coming in, have been coming into, or we're coming in to use that residential food scrap area. That's a tricky place too. But it's, it meets the requirements and things like that. So we're still kind of hashing that out in terms of what the internal flow would be. But yes, the larger vehicles that need to be weighed would both need to be weighed in and weighed out. We are looking at potentially what we would call tearing the trucks. In other words, getting kind of their weight so that they would only need to go one way. That might be a safer or a better way to do it. We haven't hashed all that out yet. It will be big enough for, it will be 2-way, so that folks can come in and out. Whether everybody comes in and out that way, whether a portion of who comes in goes out that way, we're still kind of working on that a little bit.
Why not use the original driveway for the house where the new scale house and maintenance garage will be? Is that just too short of a?
Yeah, it's really tight in there. And, again, one of the things we wanted to do is try to get, if we do have a couple trucks or, some folks lining up, we don't want that going out onto Redmond Road. We don't have a ton of that happening now, but, occasionally when it's a busy leaf season, and we do get people, we do have room for them to get up, but where the existing scale is, we're going to be using some of that area. We need that for material storage and drop off, quite frankly. Yeah, so, and we will be getting rid of that driveway, and as well as the existing access point, you know, we intend to kind of just return that to, you know, natural or lawn area. We're not gonna keep all those curb cuts. We're gonna eliminate those and just have the new one.
Would you be putting in a large culvert on the stream or a bridge?
We're looking at a culvert right now. The engineering, I think it would be just a 36-inch. It's, you know, I looked at that, whether it should be bigger or whatever. It's actually a, you know, it is an intermittent stream, but it's, you know, I think during really, really large events, I've seen a lot of flow in there, but for the most part, there's not a ton of flow. So a 36-inch culvert's what we've been, you know, our engineer has kind of said that will work.
And when you say it nicks the wetland, what, like how many feet into either the buffer or the wetland is the road? The new approach?
Yep. There, thanks. That's helpful. Does that go, how far does that go up, Melinda? So it really doesn't. Okay, so this just shows the middle. So when I say nicks the wetland, it's the wetland in that corner that it nicks from where Melinda's showing you. And then, and I didn't put that on there, but if you go back to the other, so there's that impact to this wetland, this class 2, which is in the corner. And then there is a, you know, a wetland immediately, right, kind of along the stream. So it's really 2 different places that we're impacting, 2 different wetlands, if you will, that we're impacting.
Yeah, that was my question is, I'd like to see a map of the delineated wetlands up in the impact area so that we can, you know, just judge what partially judge those impacts.
Okay.
With including buffers and the normal stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
So Melinda, you know, in our bylaws, I mean, wetlands are wetlands, and do we have anything in place so that we can have mitigation if there is an impact? I thought we didn't have that.
Well, we don't, but our bylaw does allow roads to cross over streams and wetlands.
You were mentioning, Janine. Oh, by the way, Eric, I saw you had your hand up. Are you good?
Yeah, Gary asked the question that I had,
Okay.
but since you gave me the floor,
Go ahead.
Reed, I'll just point out that I thought, this is going back a long time now, a good 10 years or so, but I thought we had a program in place at one point that allowed developers, for example, to offset an impact along the stream with, you know, if they're impacting a small portion of a stream or the buffer area, so they could offset that impact by restoring wetlands elsewhere in town. But I guess maybe that was just a program that was not necessarily part of the buffer.
Yeah, maybe that was pre-2009, which is the adoption date of the current bylaw.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Reed.
No problem. Yeah, I was just gonna try to come back to just kind of the scale of the impact and the restoration, because you were mentioning, Janine, that that the proposed restoration area, for the purposes of just, I don't know, kind of this preliminary conversation, is larger than the impacted area. Could we just take a look at the numbers, Melinda? I think it was in the memo or the.
Yeah, it's in the memo, and I'm going to be honest, I'm having a hard time like figuring out how to pull up the stream impact.
Okay. So
area.
yeah, so 1,400 square feet of wetland proposed to be impacted roughly, and restoring 1,400 square feet of wetlands. So yeah, 10 to 1. And 7,000 square feet of buffer, and restoration of 17,000 square feet. So just at a high 1,000-foot level, this seems like something that is potentially a positive for the area in general. Obviously, the devil's in the details as far as, not all square feet are equal in terms of wetland function, habitat, and stuff like that. So I do want to take a closer look, especially at the impacts to the stream. But in terms of what you've proposed and the spirit of it, I do like it, Janine.
Thanks, Reed. So yeah, and just to kind of talk about that a little bit. I mean, I share that concern. I've worked in this kind of for a while, and I've seen a lot of things that have been proposed that aren't a good thing. And I also worked with Evan Fitzgerald, who was the gentleman who did the second wetland delineation, just because was subcontracted through our engineer. I've worked with him a lot, and I actually had that question. I said, would it make more sense for us to mitigate along that stream, going up? Because that would be my initial thought. It would make more sense to do that. And his response was, when you get above where we're crossing, it's actually wooded along the stream. He felt like that was already in good shape. And so whereas the area that we're proposing, has been being mowed biannually, you can see it doesn't have as much tree growth and things like that. And so, what we would propose would be we're going to stop mowing it, letting it grow back naturally. I forgot what they're calling it, the demarcation area, which is, kind of along the road. Yeah, there you go. We could do that as a planting or as a cedar fence or some combination of the two. I've already talked to him about, what kind of trees would work in there. So yeah, I did look into that, Reed, that, you can kind of see, Melinda, actually, you can kind of see the tail end of, if you go to your upper right, that wetland buffer, that's where that stream wetland ends. So we're not impacting all of that, but that's about the width that you're looking at. I'm sorry, I don't have a bigger, I should have provided that. But, you can see that that's already treed, and, there's not a lot of impact in that area currently, which is why, he thought restoring the other one would be a better proposal. And I kind of agree with that.
Why are you mowing in that wetland area in the first place?
We've done it historically, it was an agricultural field, and we've just kind of kept doing what was being done there. We brush mow it, twice a year, just to kind of keep things down. We do the Velco fields too. So, that I don't know other than to tell you that. I mean, we have accessed that old farm road before. I think it's just, just something that we've been doing historically, that was done before we were there, and we've just kind of kept it going.
So there's no proposed development that's going to happen on that land. You weren't keeping it open for that reason.
Probably, yeah, they probably were keeping it open just in case, but, now that we've delineated the wetlands on that property, we did look at potentially putting I don't want to say a wood depot, but using a back field that you can actually see on the ortho photos to try to use that as like a wood waste depot. But, we were just basically threading the needle with the different wetlands. They're not all class 2. There are some most of them are class 3 on that property, with the exception of these down here. But, I think we just kind of had that discussion that it just doesn't make sense. We didn't want to, be threading that. You're going to, if you have vehicles going back and forth, you need to be concerned of if they're, in the buffer, or if they, it just didn't make sense for us. but I think, yeah, I think historically, that's why we have been keeping some of this stuff open, is just in case we need to do something in the future. But, you know, we've now done the wetland delineation on this property, and that would not be an area that we would use for anything.
Oh, go ahead, Gary.
Oh, I had a couple questions. I hope I don't ask Eric's questions again. When I look at this wetland map around the area of that you're proposing for mitigation, I see a few things that are weird. First of all, I'm wondering why you can't move that entrance road up 30 feet and keep it out of the buffer, which would be nice. And also there are areas that are in the what we would call the buffer, but aren't delineated as restoration areas. For example, over to the west side of it, there's a wooded area that's not delineated as a restoration area that might be protected. And also in the kind of northeast part of that restoration buffer, there's another area that's not included in the restoration area that we would normally, if it's considered a protected buffer, we would expect that to be included in a buffer and treated as such. I guess those were my major comments at this time.
Yeah. If you see, I see the little I don't know, trapezoid, is that what it is? The little kind of dip that you're seeing. I think the reason it's just not demarcated as restoration because it's already got tree growth. It doesn't mean it wouldn't be mitigated because it is part of the class 2 wetland buffer, if that makes sense. I think that Eric was just trying to, Evan, I'm sorry, was just trying to denote the area that that actually needed to be restored. So you're right that the edge of the buffer would still be part of the overall mitigation, but it just doesn't need to be restored, so to speak, because it's already got good growth on it. I think that's what he was, I had that same question. I was like, why did we leave that out? So, and that's my understanding of that.
I think we would,
yeah. I'm sorry.
Good. No, I was just going to say, I think we would expect all that to be included in a buffer that would probably be, labeled, that has some kind of fence or rocks or something around it that would delineate that buffer area that people should stay out of.
Right. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the bylaw. So if roads are allowed, is there anything else in the bylaw that said roads are allowed, but you have to do everything you can to stay out of a buffer, or roads are allowed and Janine has, done all this work, pretty much it's work that doesn't actually need to be done since roads are allowed. Is that correct?
So road crossings are allowed. And I think what the work that's being proposed to restore that area should be done, because they shouldn't be mowing in a wetland or wetland buffer.
Both are true, you're saying.
Okay, that makes sense. And to Gary's question, maybe you already answered it, Janine, why can't you just pop that road up a little bit?
So I'm sorry, did you say to the north? Well, yeah. Up to really up.
This road.
Yeah, just keep it out of the buffer.
Well, so that's a great question. I think that a couple things that went into that, if you go out there, that area actually, one, we wanted to kind of already use. So there is an existing curb cut there for that old field road. So there's already impact there. I'm just watching where you're, what is that?
Oh, right here.
It's Melinda's little man.
Okay.
Let's see.
Yeah, that works. Great.
Wait, where is the curb cut? Let's go back. Trying to get it to go.
Yeah, if you can drop in the right spot, we can see that
It's
that
right here.
farm road headed off. Yep.
Okay, let's see if I can,
No, the
yeah,
curb
there
cut
it
would
is.
be farther
There it
north.
is. So we, I guess, there were already impacts there. We wanted to kind of use the existing curb cut instead of creating another one. And then also, I think we are going to have larger trucks coming in. And so we wanted to have, the turn radius and things like that to be able to, accommodate them turning onto the property, getting them into a straightaway to go across the scale. I don't know if that answers your question or. And I also think, gosh, I really wish I could bring that up. I don't know how to do that here. Let me think here.
To the left on this picture, is that the other IBM entrance chip way?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
that.
that's the one
blocked
that's
off.
blocked off. That's Chip Alley. That's the one that has the Jersey barriers or something across it to keep, a lot of people walk on it, but you can't drive down through there. A lot of IBM people walk on it. We're not allowed.
You need a friend over at IBM.
Yeah.
So Gary, did that answer your question?
Well, I mean, it may have answered my questions. I think I would at least personally request that be an entrance be moved out of the buffer, because I mean, you're going to put a whole new road in. It's not going to be much of a change to move it 20 or 40 feet to the north. But, that would just be a general comment. And the delineation of the wetland buffers.
Well, when Janine comes back and we need to permit this, I guess the question is, what will our recommendation be? And if it still is to move the road, then we just need to let her know that so that she can plan for that and that the work can go into the planning now.
And Gary, I'll certainly look into, that in terms of, turning radius and things like that. I'm like 90% sure that there's, other than the existing curb cut and that already being impacted and us not wishing to, create more, because the other thought I had is that by doing that and moving it, we may actually be impacting the wetland closer to the stream more. So that might be part of it. And I apologize, I can't figure out how to get on my network with you guys up here, so I can't pull up a bigger, but I will do that and provide maybe a written response to you guys that, if you want to meet again and chat on it, we can do that, or, you could just take a look at that and let me know your thoughts.
So I guess if we're working with a wetland buffer around the stream, at least it seems like that should be delineated too, so that we can judge, where this.
Yeah, it is
impact
delineated.
Oh, okay. I
yeah.
just didn't see that then maybe.
Yeah, it's further to the north.
Map just
and it
cuts
doesn't-
off.
It's an extension
okay.
of there. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, the buffer that's running along the kind of the top half here from the right to the left continues over to the road, because that's where the stream crosses under Redmond Road.
Right.
So it doesn't look like there's any wetland buffer just to the north of the existing proposed entrance.
So you would rather have a new curb cut?
I mean, it's our normal procedure would be to unless absolutely necessary, have all impacts outside of wetland buffers.
But On the other hand, we have to be concerned about safe transportation. If it,
That's Public Works Department though. We don't
Yeah.
typically get into the business of
Right, we can recommend that it be completely located outside the buffer, and Public Works can recommend that it really should have a better angle for safety for vehicles, and it's for the DRB to decide how to weigh the different recommendations.
To me, it looks like, so this is going to be the actual width of that road, Janine.
Yes.
To me, it looks like you could still probably even use the same, like if you shifted it so that the curb cut started right where the middle of that road is, it seems
There's
like you
just
could
those
still
two trees
sort
that might need to come out.
of-
Yeah.
Right, you could still sort of use it and stay out of the buffer, I guess, because only part of that road is in the buffer. Part of that existing road is, like, only a very small part of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it does look like that curb cut is not wide enough for two-way truck traffic at the moment. And so you're probably gonna have to widen it anyway. If you just widen it to the north rather than to the north and south, you probably can pretty much stay out of it. That's a good idea, Belinda.
Let's see, let me look here again. So yeah, I mean, just basically going from maybe from the middle of it and going north would probably do it.
Something
You're
to
gonna have
think about.
You're gonna have to take these trees out anyway.
Right.
Maybe that one additional one as well, but
Well, it still looks like there's a good sight line for traffic coming in and out. It's a sharp curve right there, is it? It's kind of a straight.
Yeah, it's the visibility is pretty good in this section, especially compared to down where the current
Right.
two entrances are. It's much more
Right.
curvy and much more slope.
All right, so Janine, it sounds like if we could move that road, take out those trees, which would need to come out anyway, as Belinda said, that would make us very happy about.
More comfortable.
Yes.
If I can just ask one more, Gary, are you all set?
Yes, sorry.
I just wanted to verify if I'm reading the contours right, this wetland mitigation area is all uphill or upstream of the potential impacted area, correct?
yeah, it looks like it.
Do you know, Janine, if it's if the proposed restoration area is uphill or upstream basically from the crossing that's proposed?
It is. It's not, drastically, there's not a large grade there though. It's, other than when you kind of, there's kind of where those trees are. There's kind of like a hump, if you will. I'm not sure if that was natural or if that just kind of came about when, Redmond Road was put in. But then once you get over that, it kind of flattens out. So yeah, it is up gradient some, but it's not, it's not like a huge gradient difference.
So where I was going with that is if it is up, where I was going with that is if it is up gradient, then anything that you're doing to restore the ability for those lands to retain and hold stormwater will reduce impacts downstream, so that it could have a larger mitigating effect on the impacts of the project on those stream crossing and also that buffer area.
I guess I would also, and I'm not sure of this, but if we were to move out of that buffer, then essentially that would mean that the only impacts we have would be at the stream crossing. And that square footage. So in other words, then we probably would not have any mitigation. Well, I don't know if we'd have mitigation in that area or how we would propose that. But certainly if we remove that out of that area, we'd probably have to reassess whether it makes sense to mitigate with that entire area. I mean, I realize it's a class 2, we have to stay out of it anyway. But in terms of like a permanent mitigation, yeah, that might just change that a little bit. I'm not quite sure how we would look at that.
I think to Melinda's point earlier, we would really like to see that mitigation done, because that wetland area really shouldn't have been mowed over the past. It really should have been allowed to return to natural vegetation. So, you know, in terms of the spirit of it, it seems
Yeah.
as though if we're changing the entrance electively, you know, you do have an entrance that functions today. It doesn't function optimally, but it does, you are able to operate the business. Changing an entrance electively and crossing a stream in a wetland area, we would like to see what's being done to offset that impact.
And I know that this is not part of this project, but just looking at I zoomed out in this area a little bit in Google Maps, and it reminded me that there's that other new large project that's south of that. I can't recall what it is. It looks like some sort of a staging area or something.
Is that the Velco?
Is that what that is? Okay.
Yeah, that's
Velco.
the Velco.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just going to add that, you know, restoring those wetlands would also reduce stormwater impacts off of that project as well, but that's separate from CSWD. So
Is that a temporary staging area or is that a,
Mm-mm. It
No,
was permitted,
that's in, and that was built, I don't know, 4 years ago,
2017.
maybe?
yeah, it
Yeah.
was permitted like in 2016, 2017. Yeah, and it's gonna stay there.
All right, does anyone else have any comments for Janine?
Yeah, could you go back to the wetland delineation map for a minute, that map? And I noticed that it may not be important at all, but just for the sake of completion, you've got this wetland way on the east side, that skinny little wetland that does not have a buffer demarcated. And it seems to me that the buffer ought to be demarcated on that, even though it's a ways away from where you're working.
Is that class 2 or class 3?
That's a class 3, which is why the
Oh,
buffer wasn't demarcated, but I don't, does Williston, and I don't have a problem with that. As I said, you know, we're not really interested in using, but do you guys have a buffer on class 3s recommendation? Some towns do, I just don't know.
It depends. Usually, so the Conservation Commission can ask for a functional assessment of class 3 wetlands. And if it's determined to have high functional values, it can require a buffer around it, width to be determined, 25 feet, 50 feet. And if the assessment shows that it doesn't really have functional value, then usually the Conservation Commission does not require any buffer around it.
I
So
just
would-
wanted to, go ahead, Laura.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, would Fitzgerald know that, whether, since they were working there, whether that
Yeah,
had
well-
value?
Well, I mean, yeah, so I guess, you know, not really knowing what particular functions and values you're interested in, but yeah, that is part of when they delineate, they actually review functions and values, and depending on what those functions and values are kind of what determine whether it's a class 2 or a class 3 wetland. So yes, we do have that information. They did that and made that call. Yeah, it's not just based on size, although size, you know, does automatically trigger something into a class 2. But when you get down into smaller ones, it's yeah, it is based on what their different functions and values are as to whether it's a class 2 or class 3. So I can certainly look at that information. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Reed.
I was just going to say, thanks, Janine, for bringing this to us early on, because typically it's a much higher pressure situation trying to review things like this. It's nice to be able to see it now and talk it through, and we'll be more prepared when you submit your application.
Question, does anybody have an interest in doing a site visit to this site? I know we talked about having one or more people do that if you have an interest. So, you know, since this is early in the process, you know, there's time to do that if you want.
Well, I go down there all the time anyway to dump off our compost and our garbage, so I could stop in and look around.
Eric, I don't want to volunteer because I don't know what your time constraints are like, but I feel like I'd really value your opinion if you were able to take a look at it in person.
Sure, I could figure that out. I head down that road just about every other Saturday morning.
Yep.
So there is kind of a cable across that field road, I believe. So, but I do think there is probably room to pull a car or two off. So just, you know, be conscious. You also can probably pull across right at that Chip Valley where that is, you know, that IBM road, you know, and then just walk across the road there to get up into it. But yeah, and you guys probably know it can be crazy on Saturday mornings sometimes going down there. So just be careful.
Good point.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll find a weekday instead.
Yeah. And wear your hunter orange at this point too.
Right. Yes.
All right.
All right. So I'll certainly look into, you know, why we chose to not move outside of that buffer. I'll talk with our engineer about it and respond to you guys on that. And yeah, if you just want to keep the conversation open, or if Melinda, if you guys, you know, need me to come back or anything like that, maybe after site visits, let me know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so Janine, do you know what your timeline is as far as like submitting an application? Is it going to be
you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we actually have already started the state application processes for stormwater and wetlands, which now I may have to shift a little bit. For you guys, it's already almost November. I was going to say try to get it in November, December. I mean, we're interested in getting it permitted this winter so that we can construct late next spring. So I think it'll just depend on how much we have to shift. And yeah, that's our goal. We still need to also do our solid waste permitting, and then we got to go through Act 250 for this as well. And like I said, we're kind of trying to figure out the circulation on top a little bit more tightly before we kind of continue on. So earliest would be later in November, but I'm thinking it'd probably be more December at this point.
Yeah.
And I probably should look at your DRB schedule, because I know sometimes you guys are a couple months out.
Yeah, I would say usually they prioritize residential pre-apps during the last few meetings of the year. That being said, we don't have a lot of residential pre-apps, but you know, I would say we're into December, if not January, with DRB.
Okay.
And so you and I can talk about, you know, can do a follow-up chat if you'd like, Janine, just to kind of figure out what else you would need for that.
Okay. No,
Yeah.
that's great.
Okay.
Thank you, Janine, so much.
Yep, you're welcome. Let me know if you have any other questions, and I don't know if, here's how I leave. I'm not sure. All right. Take care. Thanks, you guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, bye-bye.
All right, so,
Can I make a general comment about this whole area being, is that okay?
yeah, go ahead, Gary.
Well, I was just gonna say, one thing we discovered here was that they have been mowing and highly impacting a class 2 wetland all along. And I just wonder how many other places on their property are there wetlands that are also being impacted like that, that we should be worried about? Just comment.
There are a lot of areas in town that are, I mean, a lot of Williston is swampy. So there are a lot of areas being mowed that would otherwise be functioning wetlands.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Gary, and I'm trying to think about how we could go about tackling that. And first thing that comes to my mind is to use the state wetlands layer as a coarse filter, and then from there, I don't know. I guess we, maybe an approach would be to recruit an intern or an R2 class or to a fix or whatever it is class, and put them to work on it, on identifying areas like that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to keep in mind is that this whole area has been established for a long time, so it probably predates our current wetland regulations and would be considered a non-conforming use. So there are limitations about, what you can require them to do.
So Gary has a good point. I mean, I think that people, especially when they're by, backing up to the Allenbrook or wherever, they, they're not thinking about wetland mitigation. They're thinking, okay, I just, have this business here and I'm going to set up some tables and chairs and mow this area. So it might be nice to look at that wetland, the state map of the wetland areas. And there probably are more than that. And
Actually, let me do something here. I'm going to bring up our constraints map just for the heck of it.
It looks like the IBM mows quite a bit there. Is that similar habitat there? Is that class 2 or 3? And I know this summer, just driving around in Williston, I just noticed so many people were mowing big fields, like in the beginning of July and whatnot. And they were just mowing it to keep it down, but they were mowing before the grassland birds were able to, fledge. And so that was very unfortunate. And it'd be nice to get a little education out there.
So it looks like the class 2 wetland layer doesn't really show a lot in this area. It's very underrepresentative of wetlands, as we know, but all it's showing in this general area is just this stream buffer. It's not showing any wetlands.
And the red, Melinda, is a stream buffers, or what is that red?
Steep slopes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
So Melinda, do you think that something we need to do in the future is work on those regulatory maps to show more wetlands?
Well, we rely on A&R's wetland layers, and I think it would be difficult to construct a wetland layer that really reflects accurate conditions on the ground. I mean, it would be a huge undertaking, which is why probably those wetlands aren't reflected in the A&R layer, because they just, it's too much work to get them. I mean, I think they try to update those maps when they can, but there's a lot that's not represented there. So I think just continuing to ask for delineations in areas where there's development proposed is probably the best way to approach it.
Yep, and those functional assessments when there's marginal class 2, class 3.
Yeah.
The functional assessments help us understand whether it's worth recommending protections or not.
Once those are done, for example, like they have just been done at the compost facility, should we take those and just put them on our map so that we know where all these areas are that, and then.
Well, ideally, that would be a great idea. It's just that it's still a huge undertaking to do that every single time. It's not as simple as just taking something and slapping it on the map. There's a lot of work that has to be done in order to incorporate that data. Yeah, sure, I'd love to do that, but I just, finding the time to do that is a challenge.
Thank you, Melinda. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. All right, so let's go on to the significant wildlife habitat area in our draft language of our bylaws.
So since the last time we talked about this, I'm going to try to close some of these. I've gone back into GIS and tried to clean up the map a bit and done some work. This is actually not representative of that cleanup work, but I've been doing that as I look at draft language. I've been going back in and doing some cleanup. So
by cleanup, you mean things that didn't get mapped very well, where something just clearly doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
As mapped. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I also have gone back in. I didn't really like the way Jens approached connecting areas, connecting blocks. It was really pretty messy and not all of it made sense to me. So I've been making an attempt to do that using our existing wildlife corridors layer. And primarily what I've done with that is I've taken the existing layer, which let me see if I can bring this up. There's a lot of overlap. Hold on a second. Between the corridors and the core. Let's bring this up. So if you look at our existing map, there's a huge amount of overlap between the wildlife corridors and the core. And to me, there's no real purpose to that. It's like it doesn't make a lot of sense, because if there's core habitat, it stands to reason. Right, it stands to reason that that if animals can live there, they can also travel through it, right? So the first thing I've done is to take all those areas of overlap out of the corridors map. And so that's one thing. And then that's kind of what I'm in the middle, so I'm in process of like cleaning up the corridors layer. And anyway, just thought I'd tell you that for one. And
can I ask a question about that, Melinda?
Yeah.
Is it accurate to say that, in the past, it didn't matter that there was overlap between the corridors and the core because everything was how do I say this, regulated casually with regard to how core was dealt with? It was like, try not to impact it kind of thing, but that in the future, if we're going to be much more strict about core versus like tier 1, tier 2 and connections or corridors, that it may make more of a difference to not have them overlap.
Yeah, that's correct, I think.
And
All right.
shouldn't we
So,
consider corridors, the connections from one core to another?
exactly. Yeah, I think that's a better, that's a accurate depiction of what they are. And they're not always like as linear as, I mean, I think when this wildlife travel corridors layer was made, it was sort of during the time when corridors, there was it was more of a linear concept. And I think today that concept has evolved a bit. And it's gotten a little more messy, and connections can also be stepping stones. They don't have to be like a linear corridor from one block to another. It's a little bit less defined, a little bit messier than that. Anyway, I took a first try at looking at the language and trying to revise the language. The first thing I did was, you'll notice that this whole landowner's right section has been completely stricken, because I think that language basically, it sort of negates everything in the chapter, and it gives an easy out for people that don't want to comply with the standards. It's just, so, you know, I guess my question would be, why put that up front and center? You know, just to, like, the very first thing in the chapter, here's an easy way for people to get out of the regulations because of landowners' rights. So even though, I mean, legally, yes, landowners have some rights, but I guess I question why it should be front and center, very first thing in the chapter. So anyway, that's, and it's very vague as well. It just, you know, doesn't really say anything.
Yeah, any rights that landowners have can be indicated in each of the where appropriate. So that makes sense to me.
So so basically I worked with the definitions a bit to try to clarify the definitions. I updated the language to reflect current terms. Instead of core habitat blocks, and instead of wildlife connectivity corridors, habitat connectors is the term that's generally used today, at least in the state of Vermont. And then I
think I missed
added
that a little bit, Melinda. Did you say that that it seems as though people are moving away from calling them corridors and moving toward calling them connectors? Is that right?
Yeah, that's, at least in Vermont, that seems to be the more up-to-date terminology.
It does capture more of the vagueness of it, that it's not always linear from one location to another, but more of a, like you said, a messy connection between different areas.
Yeah, correct. And then I added in wildlife road crossings as another layer. If you'll recall, Jens identified significant road crossings. I'm not sure yet about how those can be, I'm not sure about the standards.
Yeah, the main thing Jens recommended about wildlife road crossings was to try through regulation to maintain canopy cover on both sides.
Yes.
Right. That, you know, maybe you can't reasonably prevent lots of impacts to those areas, but if you can at least keep the canopy cover, then it improves the value of that crossing.
Yeah. And then I I put in language about tier 1 and tier 2. Tier 1 as having the greatest importance for supporting wildlife and biological diversity due to land area, remoteness from development, unique natural features, and/or opportunities to support wildlife movement at a regional landscape scale. And that they are afforded the highest protection standards. And then tier 2, habitat blocks greater than 20 acres that support wildlife but are less important than tier 1 blocks due to the presence of fragmenting features around them or the relative isolation from other regionally important forest blocks. And then the tier 3 are just the agricultural fields greater than 10 acres, which could still serve to support grassland birds. And then the definition of a wildlife road crossing.
Could I ask a question about the 3 tiers?
Yeah.
I noticed that you've got a size criterion for tier 2 and 3, but not for tier 1 habitat blocks. And I'm just wondering, do we need one for, I mean, what's the thought about size on the tier 1 habitat block?
Well, I think it's not so much size there. And if I go to the map, you'll see that tier 1 is the red blocks and the tier 2 are the orange blocks. And so it's a little bit hard to distinguish them by size. It's more that the tier 1, the tier 1 are more connected to each other and to other blocks outside of Williston. Whereas if you look at this tier 2 block, it's fairly, I mean, it is connected to these, but it's not as connected to like on a regional landscape scale.
Or it's more fragmented, yeah.
Yeah, this
But
one
I do think, Carl, you may have a point. I think when Jens was looking at defining blocks in general, whether they were tier 1 or tier 2, regardless, that he was looking for at least a certain acreage.
I believe, yeah, I think that's where the 20 acres came in play.
So it may be that tier 1 and tier 2 should both mention greater than 20 acres, but
Yeah.
tier 1 would just also mention the functionality of the habitat. We should double check, but I think it went into both.
There seems like there are a lot of small tier 1 blocks.
Did or didn't
On the
seem like
map.
they were.
Like those ones along on the east side of Oak Hill Road there, small blocks.
Yeah.
Between Oak Hill and South Road. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think for that reason, it's kind of hard to make a distinction in area between tier 1 and tier 2. But for both of them, there are definitely blocks they're all blocks that are greater than 20 acres.
Yeah, so I
But-
think that should appear in both sections
Okay.
there. It's a good
Yeah.
catch, Carl. I mean, we don't want to limit ourselves unnecessarily by saying that it has to be a block of 20 acres, but if that's what Jens said was the standard for determining blocks, then we should say it in both tiers.
Yeah. Okay.
If it's not true all the time, Melinda, if there were some that were under 20 acres, but were highly connected or something, something like that, then we should be saying something like typically blocks are greater than 20 acres. But if it
Yeah,
really was true that they all were, we should say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think when he was doing the GIS, he made a cutoff at 20 acres. And if there are some under 20 acres that are still important, they would appear in the connectors layer.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's then I think we're good to put it in both of those.
Mhm. Yeah, and then as far as this definition of habitat connector, I took out the part where the corridor was designed to accommodate bobcat, fisher, mink, four-toed salamander, wood frog, smooth green snake, and wood turtle, just because I think that it may give the misleading impression that other animals are not of concern. And it doesn't really, I don't know, I don't think it really provides useful information.
I agree.
It's more words,
Right.
and more words are hard to understand. So
Mhm.
if there's a resource, whatever, a go-to for Vermont species and their need for large habitat or connections, we could point to that. I don't know, that's not my area of expertise, but if there's like a Vermont Fish and Wildlife.
Well, I could point them to the Vermont Conservation Design reports.
Yeah, you could say something like for more information on habitat connection needs of different species, see this publication or something like that.
Yeah, I could put it in a little text box, just a link to that report.
Informational, yeah. I do think there's sometimes, somebody might be reading this and they really don't understand the need for connectors. And so it might be nice to get them to more information, but not necessarily have lots of specific species listed out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important if people are questioning and wondering, at least have somewhere where they can know where to find that information.
Yeah, and I can also give a link to the Williston reports or what I could do is provide a web page with links to all those resources and just put a link to that in the text box.
Yep. Yeah, whatever you think is most sustainable over time, because obviously this needs to live for a period. You don't want to point to something that then moves or something like that. But
yeah, I mean, right. So, all right. So then we get to the standards and the exemptions. And this is the part that's going to need a lot of work. So when I looked at drafting standards, I looked at the city of South Burlington's brand new updates to their natural resource protection standards, and kind of took some of what they have there and applied it, where appropriate, kind of took some of their standards, including exemptions. They exempt lots less than 1 acre. There's not going to be very many of those. And so I put that exemption in here. We could take a look at what lots those are on the map and just kind of make sure that it's not going to have a great impact on a habitat block. I kind of doubt that it would, but
in terms of our strategy here, I just wanted to say that I think we should write the regulations, draft the regulations the way that we think best protects these resources that Jens has helped us identify and map. And then we should go back and look at what the impacts are and see whether there's nuance to how we implement it that can benefit the community. But I think it's important not to start with how is this going to impact people, landowners. We have to start with what protects best and then look to see if there's ways to achieve the same thing while impacting fewer people. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. Okay. So then here, expansion of existing structures. I added the 1,000 square feet of for the cumulative total of multiple expansions, because we didn't have that upper limit in there before.
Is that to prevent somebody who already has a large structure doubling their structure?
Yeah, to have that exemption. Yeah, so the expansion of existing structure cannot exceed a total footprint of 100% of the footprint of the existing structure, or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less. And then I think previously we allowed accessory structures shall be permitted within 150 feet. I made it 100 feet. I don't know, it seems like a pretty minor thing, but.
So that's a reduction in how far from the main structure they can put an accessory structure.
Yeah, and still be exempt from the standards.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. See, or permitted to be placed on existing maintained lawns or impervious surfaces or within a designated building envelope. So there's a statement in here about alternative energy. Any alternative and renewable energy installations would be exempt from the standards. I mean, I think, first of all, any alternative energy installations that are net metered are typically exempt from our bylaws. So I don't know. I sort of had a question about that.
Does that need to be more of a call out that just points to whatever regulations do apply to alternative energy projects rather than stating something in our regulations that our regulations don't even apply to?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether it's more of a note than it is an actual rule, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of, down here, it sort of does, like I do call out the exemption under state law of state regulated utilities.
Can that 127.567, can that one just be updated to say this includes alternative energy projects?
Yeah, it includes net metered alternative energy projects. Yeah, I can do that.
Something like that to combine them.
Yeah. And then same thing, agricultural and silvicultural practices are also exempt from local regulation.
I have a question about that. So
yeah.
agricultural, one of the objectives here is to try to improve habitat. Should we still say something like it's recommended that you follow certain practices, even if you're using it for agriculture or silvicultural practices?
Well, we can't, I mean, you can say that, but that it just, we have no power to
Enforceable.
regulate.
Yeah.
I mean, you can always alternatively and separately outside of our regulations, we could choose to work with farmers and, like Terry said, do some outreach and education.
Yeah, I'm thinking mowing practices. I'm thinking how to maintain effective or whatever valuable edge habitat. how to tell if perhaps you're doing agricultural activities in a wetland and
Yeah,
how to adjust your practices to maintain the wetland, just all the things that we could do. But I understand that might be a better fit for a program, a town program, rather than a regulation.
yeah. I would agree. So I don't quite know what to do about this section here, whether it belongs in as an exemption or whether it really is a review procedure. So I sort of, that's just a question mark in my mind. And I don't know yet what to do with this, whether to leave this statement here or just take it out and just have it belong in under the review procedures.
I'm trying to understand what you just said, Melinda, about the undue adverse impact.
So here we have it, it's an exemption, so.
Oh, I see. It's a sub bullet under exemptions. Got it.
And I'm not sure whether it really should be in this section because.
So you're saying maybe it belongs in 2757 review procedures?
Yeah, or just, I mean, what it implies is that, and
if you can get somebody to say there's no
like,
undue adverse impact, you're exempt.
Right. So, yeah, exactly. So you can get a habitat disturbance assessment done, but our understanding of that habitat disturbance assessment is it outlines mitigation measures that should be followed. And this makes it seem like if that habitat disturbance assessment documents no undue adverse effect, then you're completely exempt from the standards. And that to me is not, it seems conflictual.
Yeah.
To have it here. But I don't know, it's a question.
Have there been any instances where there's been a habitat assessment done and the Conservation Commission doesn't agree?
I certainly can recall times where I question it, but I'm not an expert in that area. So
yeah, okay, just curious.
I'm trying to remember a time that they came back and said there is undue adverse impact, Melinda. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah, I don't think that would ever happen because, I mean, yeah, the cynical view is that wildlife biologist is working for their client and
they're not truly independent. They're employed by the person that they are writing the review for. So I agree. I don't think it belongs under exemptions. I think there's maybe opportunity to improve how when we require a habitat disturbance assessment and what we do with it in the procedures section. But I agree, I don't like it being in the exemptions because it seems like every single time it comes back saying undue adverse impact is not a problem. So
yeah,
the word undue is the problem. Adverse impact, it seems like it always says, yeah, there's going to be impacts, but they're not undue.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it seems a bit subjective.
But I mean, the other thing about that is that people come and talk to us before they submit applications. And if somebody was to come in with a project that we can see would definitely or most likely have undue adverse impact, the staff would advise them to revise their application so that it had more chance of passing muster. So that's one thing that happens.
I mean, pie in the sky, I would love to see an independent assessment that is not working for the applicant.
Right.
I mean, ideally, we have a reputable set of biologists that the town, engages to review projects, and they're not reviewing them on behalf of the applicant.
then you run into the question of who's going to pay for it.
Correct.
I'm sure the state has enough to do, but do they ever review the habitat disturbance assessments, or do they look at it?
No,
No. They probably wouldn't be able to provide one because they don't have the staff. I'm sure.
How much
Right.
does an assessment cost usually, Melinda? Do you know?
gosh, I don't know, making a big, sort of a big guess, but 500 to 1,000.
Because what I'm thinking is if, and just hear me out, because I know I'm going off into imaginary land, but what if we said that the town will pay for the assessment after approval of a pre-application approval from the DRB? How many per year do we actually have get pre-application approval, Blenda? We have maybe a dozen projects or 24 projects?
Well, yeah, more like probably a dozen.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you're talking $24,000 a year to have better assessment of the stuff, maybe it's worth it. Just throwing that out there to structure it differently, where the town, if you get pre-application approval, then the town will pay for a habitat assessment if it's recommended, and then that way it's more independent.
Yeah, I'd almost want to have more evidence of the quality of the wildlife habitat assessments that we currently have before I jumped into something like that. Some data that said, you know, if it's paid for by the landowner, it's somehow different than if it's independent or something like that. Maybe it exists, I don't know.
I digress. I think we should get back to reading through it, but thanks, Gary.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting thought. Might be worth further consideration. I guess, you know, what I might want to do is put it out there to other planners in the state and just ask them that, you know, have you thought about paying for habitat disturbance assessments, or I don't know, just see what answers I get back.
I mean, we have similar faith in wetland delineations. I mean, we never have them checked by anyone. So,
well,
and they're being,
actually,
or do we?
no, actually, so this, because the state protects Class 2 wetlands, they do verify these
Oh,
delineations. But that's more
so they go in the
straightforward.
field. Yeah.
That's
Right, it's more
straightforward.
visual, right? It's concrete evidence, yeah.
Right. They just, I mean, there's a definite line on the ground that, and it's verified by the state. I mean, maybe someday that'll happen with wildlife habitat too, but it tends to be more fuzzy.
And do you have I like your suggestion to find out whether other planners have considered that. Do you have a good avenue to get that question? Is there like a
Yeah,
forum or something?
Yeah, the listserv, the planners listserv. So
Would you be willing to ask that and see what feedback we get?
sure, I can do that.
Maybe there's a list of suggested folks that do habitat disturbance assessments that people are comfortable with for towns.
If we did eventually make that change, wouldn't it have to be signed off by Planning Commission and the Select Board?
Well, yeah.
All of this would, right?
Yeah.
These would be recommended changes. They'd be sent to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission would determine whether they want to recommend them to the Select Board, who would approve the bylaw amendment.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on, unless anybody has other questions about what we just talked about. So under review procedures, I added in a sentence here about tier 3 habitat blocks, that if a land, if the parcel contains only tier 3 habitat blocks, only ag fields, then it would be exempt for the requirement for a habitat disturbance assessment, because those are the large ag fields, and those are the habitat blocks that are afforded the least protections. And I mean, since you'd mostly be, I mean, either those areas are the ones that are gonna get developed, as in Creek's Edge. It seems kind of a little pointless to require habitat disturbance assessments for those particular areas.
Well, and I think Jens was saying philosophically that if you're going to regulate, you should regulate heavily on things that have high value and not waste your time regulating things that don't.
Yeah.
Right? That was his point, was if you regulate everything the same, you end up not getting the best results.
Mhm. Anyway. Anything further on that?
Now, was that the end of the document, Melinda?
No.
Oh, there's more. Okay.
There's more, yeah.
Yeah, we're past our time, but it's fine because
Yeah. I mean, if you'd like, we could postpone the remainder of this discussion, or if you want to keep moving through it, I can do that.
what do we have on the staff report? That was the annual report, trail grants update, and recreation master plan survey. Is any of that important for today, Melinda?
No, not really.
Okay. If everyone agrees, I think we're on a roll with this. We can just keep looking at it.
Okay.
I'd like to continue.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Good, yeah.
So the one thing that South Burlington has in its regulations, although I think that in some ways it's complicated, but they have this provision where you can shift the location of a mapped habitat block, either by a minor amount, and offset it somewhere else. And then if you're going to, offset it, the understanding is that the area that you're going to be offsetting it with either has some value, or will be restored to function as a habitat block.
This is sort of analogous to what CSWD brought to us today, to say,
yeah.
if you're close, but you just slightly can't keep out of impacting a habitat block,
Yeah.
then you can basically use this option to offset.
Yeah. And then it also says, okay, so if you modify a habitat block, the area that you're replacing with it has to be contiguous to the habitat block. Like you can't take like a small isolated piece somewhere else and say, okay, well, I'm gonna turn that into habitat block and take some of this larger block, develop it. You can't do that. And there can't be a net reduction of the area of a habitat block. So if you're using part of it, you've got to take an area elsewhere and offset it with that area. And then another provision says, if you have a parcel that's substantially covered, like if over 75% of your parcel is covered with conservation areas. And by conservation area, I mean habitat blocks, unique natural communities, rare, threatened, endangered species, or watershed protection buffers. If the combined area of different conservation areas makes up more than 75% of your lot area, then you could be eligible for some relief from the standards. So the applicant's entitled to redesignate a portion of the habitat block to allow for 25% of the total parcel area to be buildable area. So basically you're allowed by right to be able to develop 25% of your parcel. And I use that percentage because in the ARZD that, we require that 75% of the parcel be set aside as open space. So kind of to be consistent with that. And then I don't know, I sort of got hung up on like just other provisions that should be added to this.
That makes me nervous. I see why it is consistent with the open space restriction in the ARZD, but
Yeah,
when I think about what Jens said about the eating away at the habitat blocks that occurs with small
yeah.
encroachments, it just makes me really nervous.
Yeah, plus I think people could buy a lot and think, okay, there's this provision, so we can like adjust things around and, they can take advantage of this, I would think.
Maybe, would it make sense for me to do some kind of analysis in GIS to actually see what land we're talking about here, like what parcels this would apply to?
I think that needs to be looked at for more than just this section.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like there's other provisions in here that we should do some analysis before recommending to the planning commission
yeah,
to show why we're making these changes and that we've checked on what the impacts are going to be and the likely
Yeah.
outcomes are going to be, because that's just good practice. But I want to
Yeah.
make sure that you don't spend time on something that we end up striking or deciding has to be in there no matter what anyway. So
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea to pencil in that that's something that needs review, but
Mhm.
I don't know how other commissioners feel about, Carl, Terry, do you guys have strong feeling? Gary, do you have strong feelings about this sort of opt out if you're heavily impacted with 75% of your lot?
And I think that's where this other thing comes into play. Like, we can exclude, like it can't include unique natural communities. It can't include rare, threatened, endangered species habitat. It can't include watershed protection buffers. I don't know, just kind of thinking.
This be a townwide, this would be over all the zones,
Yeah,
because the planning commission was proposed to put a open space requirement for, what's that zone called? I forget now. That's the sewer district.
yeah.
The RZD?
Right. And
I don't think that ever went anywhere, but
no, it didn't. So they used it and there wasn't even a chance to negotiate. They just said no for that section. And well, that was a section that folks were trying to change that. So I think it might be hard to get a 25% of the parcel area because there's still some pretty big blocks of land in the sewer district there.
yeah,
I wonder whether one of the types of relief that could be offered, Melinda,
Yeah.
is we've talked about a program that in combination with revising SWHA, we've talked at some points about the need to also consider pairing that change with a TRD, a transfer of development rights, TDR program
Yeah.
to allow, if somebody has a highly constricted property because it is nestled right in with a core habitat block,
Mhm.
that's a situation for me where the kind of the easy path, the direction that people are encouraged to go by the regulations should be, if you want to develop or you want to subdivide or you want to put a second dwelling unit on your property, you really shouldn't be doing it on that property. You should be able to have options to sell that property. Either the town buys the development rights so that you can get monetary value out of the property without damaging the ecological value,
Yeah.
or you can sell those development rights to somebody developing in the growth center or something like that. I mean, it just seems like this is one of those times where that could provide relief to people with highly constrained properties.
Yeah, I think as far as transferring development rights to the growth center, I think that the growth center is likely, or there's strong consideration now with the form-based code to just eliminate the density requirements altogether in the growth center. So there wouldn't be there would no longer be density bonuses. It would just be eliminated altogether. But that's not to say, like, maybe you could do that, transfer development rights to some portions of the residential zoning district that were outside habitat blocks.
And I know, Terry, you've been really worried about density in the village and residential areas.
I think a lot of people have, but yeah.
No, just, in terms of those of us on the commission, I know that's something that you're passionate about. Maybe it's that we need to consider better funding streams for the town to purchase properties like this. If there's, if the choice is between further fragmentation or encroachment, and the town purchasing the land, I just would like to see these, especially tier 1 habitat blocks, being completely preserved.
Well, maybe it cannot, maybe the 25% buildable area can't include tier 1 habitat blocks.
That would be another way of helping with that. Yep.
Yeah, but I think just it may, I don't know, answer some of these questions if we just, or it may help us if we figure out how much, what parcels we're actually talking about here. I mean,
it would be nice to see a big map like we did that one meeting. We were able to roll out that big map and really get where the tier 1 areas were and where the potential building was going to be happening. So
I guess that doesn't have parcels. Anyway,
I just want to throw out one more suggestion for these reliefs, which is another thing to consider, is to say, if it already has a residence on it, and somebody wants to add a second, subdivide and create a second residence, that to me is a little bit different than somebody who wants to buy the property and then build a home on it, because there's already human activity on the lot if it's already residential. So I just wanted to throw that out there as another option.
Well, and in fact, if there's a lot that's not been developed, somebody could obtain a variance if there's, if under these regulations, there was no way to build a home on it, they could get a variance. So it sort of would work, either way, but. All right, so clearly this is something that we're gonna have to
Yeah, we'll
spend
have to
some more
work,
time.
keep working on it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's 4 minutes left, so I kind of want to. Should we? I kind of feel like there's a lot more to talk about, and there's just wondering if maybe we should look at it at a future meeting. Like,
Yeah, I think that's right.
A lot.
Yeah, we shouldn't rush through this, and plus we can also think about a lot of the ideas that we have brought up too, and whether we want to continue on with those.
Could I throw out one question regarding what you're showing currently, and that's 27591, where it
Yep.
says avoid the encroachment of development into tier 1 habitat. I would say that that's a contradiction in terms, that if you are developing in a tier 1 habitat, you're encroaching it. So
right, but I think what that means is, so you have a parcel and it has some tier 1 habitat, but you have other areas of the parcel that aren't in a tier 1 habitat, then you can avoid developing in that tier 1 habitat.
okay, but I think that it needs to be more clearly stated, so that,
You'd like to see that stronger, Carl?
well, I just like to, I mean, that statement to me is when you say avoid the encroachment of development into a tier 1 habitat.
So previously it said, go ahead.
I mean, it just seems like a contradiction in terms to me, that if you just that statement.
Well, what about the sentence after it? Site disturbances, placement of buildings, extension of road, driveways, and utilities shall be located so as to avoid encroachment into tier 1 habitat. I mean, before it said minimize the encroachment of development into core habitat. And now this is stronger language. It says you shouldn't do it at all. You shouldn't develop it at all.
Sounds like the words, Carl, you just like to see the words feel less ambiguous.
Well, yeah, I didn't realize you're making the distinction between, that the habitat is some partially tier 1 and partially not tier 1, and you're only developing in the part that isn't tier 1 habitat.
I mean,
that wasn't clear to me.
okay, I mean, if you take out the tier 1 part, I mean, basically what it says is avoid developing in this resource. So if you have a parcel and it's partially covered by a habitat block, you want to avoid developing in the part that has the habitat block.
Okay, I understand that and agree with that. That's not how I read it when I first read it.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how many parcels would follow, in the town.
Yeah, so it seems, Melinda, like we, for the next time we talk, if you feel like you have bandwidth to look at the lots that would be currently impacted by, having lots of tier 1 or lots of overall, including the tier 1, tier 2 wetland delineations, et cetera. That might help us prioritize which sections to work on.
Mhm.
But this is, I mean, you've made a lot of good suggested edits here. Thank you.
Yeah, Melinda, this is really, I mean, we're very fortunate to have a paid planner like you that can do this, because I mean, you have so much knowledge, and it, I don't think we'd be able to do it without you for sure. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
That's what I'm paid for.
Yeah, but you
Paid
do it
enough.
really, really well, Melinda. I mean, these are, most of this stuff is easy yeses. It's just there's certain things we're gonna have to talk through and analyze.
Yeah, I mean, if you feel like taking a look at the South Burlington standards, I encourage you to do it, but I honestly found a lot of their language around habitat to be very confusing. So I think they're trying to be very clear, but, and I'd like, the language should be very clear and, I don't know, with very, very clear and specific, but not confusing. And it's difficult to do both, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, if you get a chance, take a look at, I can send a link to that. But yeah, it's hard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're not
thank
doing
you.
something easy here.
Yeah. And yeah, I seem to remember Jens thought it was pretty confusing too, if I'm remembering correctly, for South
Yeah.
Burlington. All right, thank you. And if everybody could, yeah, really think about this, take another look at it and I'm not sure if we have time for our next agenda to continue this, Melinda. Do you know?
What do we have on our next agenda? We have, we have Winooski Valley Park District coming, and we have actually a couple of different pre-apps to look at.
Okay.
Maybe I could postpone Winooski Valley Park District to the next meeting, so we can talk about this a little bit more. We can do that.
Or we could postpone this too. I don't know how everybody feels, but if you've already set up Winooski Valley Park District, then it would just be more work to kind of cancel it and move it.
You seem pretty easy. Anyway, I might be able to move things around, so
Yeah.
we'll see.
Okay, whatever's easier for you.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
One short thing, if you click on this link here, Recreation Master Plan Survey, it'll take you to a survey that the Recreation Department is doing on plans for future development of Allenbrook School Park. And so if you'd like to see their concept plans and do the survey, I encourage you to do that. They want to get Conservation Commission feedback on that. Or I can also, well, it looks like they're going to probably want to get their feedback before the next meeting. So please do
Will
take
do.
a look.
Mhm.
That's
Looks
it.
like there might be potential new trails there on that land.
Yeah, they're made the northern third of the parcel. They're thinking about putting in like a trail, or maybe a fitness trail or something of that nature on there. So yeah.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, Melinda, and thank you, everybody. Have a great couple weeks until we meet again.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
See ya.
Melinda,
Thanks.
Hi, everyone.
Melinda, are you available for a 5-minute phone call after this meeting?
Sure. Yeah, you can just call. Give me like, can I talk to you in like 15 minutes
Sure.
or 10 minutes?
Yeah.
It'll just give me time to get back in my office and get set up.
Fine. Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah, give me a call. All right, bye.